Welcome to this presentation. This is the first one we've done on Business Advisory Services Update. We had been running for 24 editions our COVID-19 webinars, which featured various affiliates that we have. Amanda's obviously one of those. And we've decided now we're going to have a weekly 30-minute conversation about an issue which we think might affect you in your accountancy firm, your bookkeeping firm, or your consulting firm, as it comes to you offering great services to your clients. Incidentally, I've just participated for the last 2 days, or I've watched, and I made a presentation yesterday on the Accountants Business Expo. And the big thing that I noticed is the significant take-up of business advisory services that's occurring. There was presenter after presenter after presenter on business advisory services. Now, there's been a few guys, Andrew Geddes, Mark Holton, myself, David Smith, Rob Nixon, and a few others for years, probably 25 to 30 years, have been trying to convince accountants to offer business advisory services. So if I got anything out of yesterday, other than last night when the Townsville Fire beat the Sydney Flames in basketball, National League in Townsville, that I was there as a very enthusiastic supporter. But what I got out of yesterday was that business advisory services is here. What do you think of that, Amanda?
Yeah, look, absolutely. I have been on the same talking, talking to Mark Holton, Rob Nixon as well over those last 25 plus years. And it's definitely needed. It's definitely the path that we were wanting to go on 20 plus years ago. I know I was in practice for 18 years, and a lot of things still haven't changed. We've got accountants that wanted to do those more advisory type work 20, 25 years ago, who unfortunately still haven't got the capacity and the tools to do it. So I think a lot of things have stayed the same, where we've got more technology, more opportunities to offer these, but we're still not doing it. And I'm seeing that in the accounting practices that I coach. I'm seeing that in my private Facebook groups, just the accountants that I'm talking to. And we want to do it, but how do we do it? And how do we even, get our clients to come on board and pay us for this work that we are so well equipped to offer? But it's trying to get that service. It's creating efficiencies in our practice to be able to do it, but it's also about being able to create the capacity. And I think that's the biggest issue. We've got the tools, we've got the technology, but until we can find that capacity, it's going to be just one of those nice to have to-do lists, unfortunately.
Yeah, there were some interesting presentations. And incidentally, for those of you out there who weren't aware or missed the last 2 days, you can now go on to the Accounting Business Expo site and for the next 30 days to watch the recordings. I'm not sure, there was no one had to make a payment other than the sponsors, of course, to be involved in this event at this time, because it was a virtual conference. I think any accountant will be able to go on, log in and have a look. On the ECSB Tools website from later today, we're going to have a copy of the presentation that I made. And I'm also trying to arrange for a couple of other people who are our affiliates, like Mark Holton's and Trent Butler's and Paul Barnaby's. Did you make one, Amanda? I should have asked you.
I did not. I wasn't asked to present maybe next year. But yeah. I was away, but I haven't got to look at them. But I've heard some really great discussions about what's happened, so I will definitely take a look. And hopefully, if it might be some interesting weekend viewing, and just to get everyone thinking about and getting in that mindset about how good offering advisory can be, and just about the other efficiencies that can be created in practices that we can be looking at, getting you into that mindset, because I think the topic of today is about resetting, hitting that reset button. And I think we're all pretty happy to be seeing the end of 2020. But 2021, what options have you got? And I think this is a perfect a perfect segue into actually really creating the practice that you really want and delivering the services to the clients that you want to work with. And sadly, that creating the space might mean we have to let some clients go, but that's all, you know, is so important in this reset process. So hopefully by watching the ABE stuff, watching what we're going to present today, it's giving you some food for thought as to what your 2021 practice could look like.
Okay, so what we thought we'd do today, Amanda, in talking to accountants and bookkeepers and business consultants all over the place, is that we would start with a group of clients who probably collectively are the largest percentage of clients in most accountancy firms, other than a firm that's specializing in a particular industry. They mightn't have as many of this group of people as their clients. And what I'm referring to is tradies. Now, tradies cover a wide range of activities, don't they? From plumbers to carpenters to mechanics to panel beaters, and so the list goes on. And we were discussing before, and we think it could be, you know, up around 60% of an average accounting firm's clients. What do accountants do for these people? What's your thoughts on it, Amanda?
Well, I think traditionally we've helped these business owners set up their businesses. So we may have been involved in that very early formative stage of setting up and helping them create the appropriate structure. Hopefully at that stage, we also have had a look to see that their business model, as they think it's going to be operating, is going to, you know, make them money and make them more money than what they were actually earning working from someone else, because that's the reason why people go out on their own, because they can see what they're getting charged out at, and then can see what they're actually, how that's coming in their pay packets, and think this is pretty easy, we can do this. What they often don't work out and they haven't thought about is that the amount of non-chargeable time, so the time that they're actually doing to admin work, accounting work, going out quoting, doing all of the other things that are so necessary in both tradie businesses and even in our own as accounting practice owners, they've got to work out, you know, what their charge out rates. They've got to work out whether that business model that they're looking at is actually going to make them the money that they want. And I really think that often doesn't happen, because, you know, how do a lot of businesses come up with that charge out rate if they don't actually get help from their accountant? They're probably just using what their old boss was, or undercutting a little bit, because I think, oh, well, if they're charging this, I can charge, you know, $10 less because my expenses are going to be less, and happy days, I'm going to make all this money. But that might be okay to start with, but then as they grow, as they get staff, that rate is different, needs to be different. So I think that's what we should be doing. And then obviously helping people out with their compliance, with their BAS and their tax return, and actually doing a review each year. I suggest, you know, each year reviewing with these tradie clients and all clients. What are their goals? What are their aspirations? Are they making the money that they want out of their business? And can we help them if that's not the case? So there's a whole raft of things we can do. But I think so often we're just so under the pump, and all we're thinking about is doing the compliance work and doing the same as what we did the previous year. And we're not actually opening our clients' eyes to anything different. Yeah.
Okay, so what we might do is go back to the whole concept of putting together how you might go about advising a client on setting a charge out rate. Within ECSB Tools, we have developed a product package which is called appropriately charge out rate calculator. So it's been designed especially for tradies. We start with the labor team. Who's in the team? What payments do they receive? Is there any special payments? Do they get a bit more in superannuation than the normal rate, or do they receive any extra holidays or allowances? And what's their salary? How many hours are they expected to work in the year? Do they have special training or study leave or things like that? And then very importantly, what's the business budgeting their productivity at? And what we should be able to get then is the expected number of hours that those people are going to work. Do you see that process down to there any different, Amanda?
No, I don't think so. But I think one thing I might like to say before we get into the actual calculating, which is probably one of the pieces of, other than not having the capacity, is how do we actually start even sharing this information with our clients to be able to do that calculation in the first place. And I think that's what accountants often have a lot of trouble in doing. So we might say, do they want to know their charge out rate? So each of you've got to probably think about, as we're explaining about the tool and as we're explaining about the whole process, how would you actually explain this to your clients? How can we sell this? Because I mean, we've got all these opportunities to offer advisory services, but we've got to actually be able to communicate it and to sell it to our clients. So, a budget, you might say, well, every client needs a budget, but are they going to want to pay for a budget? Every client might want a cash flow, but are they going to pay for that? Because they'll just whatever comes in the bank. But with charge out rates, I think this is actually a really great opportunity, because this is what people actually understand, and what can go wrong if the charge out rate goes wrong. So I think that's probably the first thing I'd like to say about trying to offer these services. This is actually something that if you've tried to offer other budgeting or other value-added services to your clients, and you've actually been, hit a roadblock, they've said no, this is actually, they're probably going to start saying yes to this. So looking at even just changing up, a KPI of what someone else is charging or whatever, but it's really got to be about, really getting intrinsically what it's costing these people to run the business. Do they know their charge out rate to break even? Do they know their charge out rate to make an extra $10,000 a year, an extra $20,000 a year? So maybe even think about how you can actually talk and get your clients on board with this. But all the things that you've said, people are not taking into account their productivity. They're not taking into account the amount of hours that goes into quoting, having a chat to people, scoping out things. And actually even scoping is another thing, like what they think might be only a 2-hour job might actually take them 4 hours. So how is that also being fed back to us, that we're looking and we're asking our clients to capture this information? So you're right. I'd be interested to know, even in the chat box, are other people actually already helping their clients with this in a more formalized process, or is it a bit like, let's just do what other people are doing? So that'd be an interesting one too, Peter.
Those of you who are watching this live, and I know many of you will be watching this as a recording later on in a time that suits you, but you might send us through an answer to what Amanda just asked. How many of you are actually going through this process with your tradie clients, or doing anything else different with your tradie clients? If you feel like sharing that with us, that would be great. Because this is a very important component. And if we're basically on this pathway of offering business advisory services to clients as a major objective, I hope now, of most accounting firms, surely we've got to have a good close look at this very important client component that is lumped together called tradies, because if they're 60% or even only 40%, but there's a sizable percentage of most accountancy firms are going to be covered by this group. So if you're going to offer business advisory services, surely you've got to be offering it to these people. So we're going through the process. So we obviously need to know their labor component. How many people, how many hours are they paying for? And the figure that I always find a lack of understanding from operators is, what is the percentage of productivity that can be charged to a customer? And that can vary. I've had people even try to tell me 100%, and I've argued with that, but even 95 and 90%, I screw my face up a bit and say I don't think so. And in reality, they find they've only got 80%. But if they've set their charge out rates on some sort of calculation that they might be able to get a higher rate, well, everything's going to be out. And we do have a question. Eddie said to us, absolutely, he's doing it. Commoditizing and setting price is always the challenge. I agree with you, Eddie. And so perhaps you're already doing this, Eddie. And
well done.
Well done. And we will continue, though, on the presentation, because we're trying to get everyone else to think think about doing it. Excuse me, I'm losing my
But
head
Peter,
there.
I think yeah, definitely that, as we said about setting price, it's very important at that beginning, that outset when clients first come to us setting up their business. I think it's also equally important to be looking at it regularly. You know, whether that's every 12 months. I mean, I advocate even for accounting practice owners that I coach, and we should be, you know, re-looking at our figures and our charge out rates and our total fees at least every 12 months, maybe even more as things change. But, you know, we sit down with a client at the end of the year looking at their figures and saying, you know, oh, you've only made $30,000 this year, or you've made 50,000, or the following year with tradies, it could be a bit of a feast or a famine, and they've made 120 for 1 year because they've had a big job, and they've had a different, you know, might be a different type of work they're doing. But are we then looking back and doing that checking? You know, we could actually be, our rates could be right, but if we've actually got staff members that are actually, we have to do a lot of rework with, or people that aren't as productive as others.
Yep.
We need to be looking at that. And we also need to be actually looking at it, not just from a costing point of view, but from a staff productivity point of view and a KPI to actually see these people are costing us this much money. They've got to be making us X. It's no different. A tradie, we actually should be doing it in our own practices. And I actually see a lot of practices not actually doing it, you know, working at, this is costing me this much money to have this staff member, but they're slower, or they've got a lot of rework and we're only making this much out of them. Is that the right fit? Do we need to move those on? We don't need to change the charge out rate. We might need to move those on. So there's a whole heap of things at play here. And as today we're talking about tradies, but this conversation is equally important to your own practice and also to any others, you know, any consulting businesses that we have, because we're selling our time and work at this commodity.
That's right.
So it's a really great opportunity. It's not just setting prices and just forgetting it.
Yeah.
It's constant.
In fact, one of the, I should have got the person's name, I can't remember, but one of the keynote speakers yesterday in the Australian Business Conference was talking about the importance of a regular meeting with the clients. Now, I think he was advocating monthly, and I agree, but at the very least quarterly. And this is for tradies, one of the key questions. Let's look at how you traded for the last month or 3 months, and let's analyze your productivity figures. How did you go with Bill? You paid him for X number of hours. What was charged? What was his percentage? You realize that that's only 70%. We've budgeted 80%. Is there a reason, or should we now go back and change the budget and therefore the charge out rate for him? It's fine tuning then rather than in 12 to 18 months after the event that I think is important.
And it's a conversation we're having with the clients that this is the tool that we're using, but you know, that's going to hopefully give them more awareness to be looking at, are people charging their time? Are they actually charging that, you know, that piece of material out, those components? Is someone charging more than others? You know, are people just being a bit lazy in capturing their time? Like, this is the sort of stuff that we should be looking at and sharing with our clients what's going into this formula, so they can be aware, because they're not going to contact us every week or every month potentially, but it's an awareness, it's an education process, and this is the tool to help them do that. Yeah. And I find them just so curious once you're doing this. They're curious and they're happy to pay.
The other big component of speakers over the last 2 days was on a theme of offering chief financial officer services. So that's where some of what we're talking about now really fits into, doesn't it? It's positioning yourself as the accountant, that you are in the middle of that organization with all sorts of questions coming to you. And if you were there, someone in your team or yourself would be measuring labor productivity, I'm sure, every week, and putting a report through to the boss and saying, hey, you know, we budgeted for this many chargeable hours this week and we only got this. With the opportunity to offer virtual CFO services, these are the type of jobs that your clients will be interested in receiving from you. But how about we move on and look at markups? Because an essential component of a tradie business is that they buy supplies, whether they're electrical contractors or plumbers or carpenters, they're buying external electrical things or timber or roofing materials or whatever, and they're installing them into clients' premises. They go to the trouble of finding where they can get the best buy. They buy it in, they pay for it. They might take a few months to get paid for that. So they normally have a markup. I think one of the key things is getting the client to, first of all, estimate based on their budget thinking, how much are they going to spend on external purchases in the year? Maybe $1 million, $2 million, whatever, set the figure. And then what is the realistic figure that they believe they can mark that up by? Now, I've heard all sorts of figures from 5% to 20% over the last few years, but the client needs to be have a discussion with you about that to make sure that they're setting that as a realistic figure. Because if it's $1 million worth of external purchases and you're marking it up by 10%, well, that's an extra $100,000 coming into the pool. What happens in that? Do you use it to subsidize your charge out rates? Or do you say, that's a super profit, I'm going to hang on to that? That's a question that needs to be discussed with tradies so they understand what's happening with that markup. Or at the end of the day, is that all their profit's going to be?
Yeah, and with the markup, I mean, I know a lot of the tradie, where they buy their goods, they actually give the recommended markups, which is great. But one of the other things that I've actually found with working with tradies, and maybe only people that are only spending $100,000 on $1 million, but $100,000 or $200,000 on the materials, is actually capturing that. So that's another thing we can be advising on, because if you're not capturing it, they're not even getting their markup. It's actually costing them money because they're absorbing the total cost of that particular product because it's getting missed. So this is another part of advisory, letting our clients know, especially for these smaller ones. I think, that's where in my practice days, 18 years of practice, I dealt with the small to medium-sized tradies. And it can be the difference in them, not even getting a wage. So it's about that awareness, like, what's their process? You think, oh, actually, that could be the reason. We're thinking we're marking up 30% because it's what Reece Plumbing are telling us to mark up. But yet, hold on, someone's at the office, it's not putting it through and costing it to a job.
And they're going into overhead expenses.
Or a particular staff member's not actually, they're taking that piece of electrical item out and they're putting it in with a fan or something. People don't realise. Or they might be just taking a whole heap for themselves to do stuff at home, like other staff members. So this is the importance of actually really tracking these numbers, and you being the leader and showing the clients what these numbers mean, and how they can look at it that every single month as their figures, that they need to have that GP or their markup, however we want to talk to the clients about it, but they can be seeing that on their P&L every month, and then they'll come and ask you. So it's creating the awareness, the curiosity, and they're going to know exactly where they're going to come and talk to you. So that was just another point, Peter, from the smaller, because there will be a lot of people watching at the minute that have a lot of smaller clients, and it could be just one man or one women bands that where it does make a huge amount of difference.
Okay.
These markups and productivity.
That's right. And the next area is the overhead expenses. So we'd be advising our clients to sit down with us and prepare a budget on overhead expenses for the years. That also needs to be monitored, because if what you're just suggesting could have happened, Amanda, that the external purchases that were being made that should be getting charged to customers, in fact, wasn't happening, and they're just being put through as business overhead expenses. If the overhead expenses were only budgeted to be, say, $200,000, and they've blown out to $310,000 because an extra $110,000 of items that should have been charged as additional items to the client hasn't occurred. And they also haven't got the markup on them. So there's a lot in that. So what we end up in the charge out rate determination, if all that's fed into the ECSB Tools charge out rate calculator, it will come out in a report for the accountant to discuss with the business operator. Here is the recommended charge out rates for the various people, if they've got different types of categories. And here is a budget proof sheet which says this is what you said you were going to pay them, this is what they were going to work, this is their productivity. So you're going to be charging out X number of hours. We put these rates through. there's the profit, there's the income for the year, and there's the profit. And at least it's then giving them some targets rather than copying their competitors or sitting in the pub listening to what the guy next to them who's having a beer and probably bragging, or his costs might have no comparison at all to your clients.
Yeah, and I compare this. I remember speaking to a client, a painter, and they were master painters, right? So their charge rate, they were doing a lot of intricate work, a lot of labor intensive, using the highest quality of paints. Now, if you're comparing their charge out rates with someone who's doing project homes, it's very different. Okay, the labor component is different. So we need to also talk to our clients, because a painting client may be different to another painting client. So it could be a mechanic dealing with European cars versus just like everyone has different charge out rates. This is why it's not a one size fits all. And sitting there doing these numbers is so very important. And I would be thinking to do something like this, you could easily charge $550 to $1,100, easily to charge. Like someone in a small space offering a client that might be turning over 250,000. That is not unreasonable to expect. That's a starting point of advisory. And once they do that and get you to check this every year, it's a bit of a rinse and repeat, but it's actually, you are their sounding board. And I think if you were to think, how many of those clients could you actually start the 2021 work with, saying we'd like to come in and just have a bit of a chat about your business, have a look at your numbers, see whether or not you're making the profit you desire. And if they're not, let's have a look at what's underneath those numbers. Let's have a look at what you're doing in your business.
So let's finish up with a few numbers today, Amanda, please, for our accounting viewers. If what would an average sort of firm? We're trying to talk average here. It's a bit difficult. But if an accountant had 300 business clients, that reasonable? And if we said that he might secure or she might secure 40% of them as tradies that are prepared to do something, that's 120 clients. And if they could generate by supplying this service, I think the figure would be closer to $1,000 a year. That's $120,000
on the bottom line.
Well, it starts up at the top, but hopefully you keep most of it. Has come into the firm. And that's really the start of offering business advisory services. I've had a few people ring me in the last 10 days. And when I've talked to them about where they want to start. Now, one guy had 3 staff working for him. Another one had income currently of $500,000 per annum, wanting to increase it closer to $1 million. When we went through and had that conversation, we finally come back to, we started pretty close to it at the beginning. This was the key product that they want to introduce, being able to sit down and have this conversation with tradies and then work from there. So I just want to check and see. I haven't noted any more questions come through, but I thought I'd better check. No, we've only had Eddie's question.
Only Eddie.
Good on you, Eddie.
Thank you.
I don't believe anyone else has got any questions, but if you think of them later on or you're watching this at a later time, please send me an email, peter@ECSB Tools, and we will get back to you. And if you like the concept of this sort of presentation, we're going to try to do this every Wednesday at midday Australian Eastern Daylight Time, 11 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. And you other time zones, I'm sure you can work out where you fit in that. So thank you very much for being with us today, Amanda. And
thank you. Can I just say one thing, Peter, just in relation to that, just in relation to ECSB Tools, and this is just coming from me now, just mentioning that if anyone, there's obviously a whole suite, we didn't talk about, but obviously Peter said you can contact him. There's a whole suite of ECSB Tools, but and that is one part of it. So this is actually can be purchased as a standalone product if people just wanted to dip their toe in the water to see whether they could actually just the charge out rate and how that's actually going to fare, how it's going to be received, and then they could move to something else, or they could buy the whole suite. I just wanted to make that, I know it's it's probably just something that people might have been questioning, how does this all work? So
yeah, okay, thanks very much, Amanda.
That's okay.
And you can go to our website, www.essbiztools.com.au, to have a look at the product. Amanda, though, is able to give you consulting services to assist you to get this process underway in your firm. And you can contact Amanda at her website. Amanda?
Yes, amandagascoigne.com, or for practice owners, I have a private Facebook group where we talk a lot about this sort of stuff, all practice management issues, and all about how to work better with your clients and have a better practice and a better life. And that is called The Balanced Firm. So if anyone is interested in hearing more of ways to have a better practice and a better life, please come along and join that group.
Okay, so thank you, Amanda, for being with us today.
That's okay.
Our next session is next Wednesday. I'm not quite sure who the other presenter is then, but we'll be sending those details out this afternoon. My assistant, Jenny, is finalising those arrangements now. And we'll be presenting these through to Christmas and then starting again around mid-January. So thank you very much. Have a great day. Stay safe.
Thanks, Peter.
Bye.
Thanks,
Amanda.
Peter. Thanks,
Goodbye.
everyone. Bye.